Grateful. It's the morning drive on Rhythm 94.7 Abuja. Time check, it's 8 o'clock from our studio. And every Wednesday at about this time, we bring you a very special program. It's called The Mind Clinic. And it's proudly brought to you by the Neem Foundation. I recall at the start of the month, we said we're dedicating every episode in this month to celebrating women, the Nigerian woman, very strong, very confident. Last week on the program, we talked about superwomen and some of the myths. We had several callers, both male, female, talk about, certain things in regards to how we can support women. Right before that, we started out discussing postpartum depression. We had Dr. John Ekwan in the studio. It was amazing. And this week on the program, we're looking at gender-based violence and abuse. In the studio, I have very capable guests, able and capable, I must say. But first, I must introduce myself. My name is Victor Pepple, very regular on the show. You know me already by now. And one other voice you would know every week. She's never late. She's always on time, bringing clarity. She's the clinical psychologist at the Neem Foundation. I'm talking about Chinyerugo Densi. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Victor, for the nice hype.
Yeah, well, in addition to the hype, she wears the cap as the co-host on the show.
Yes. Good morning, Abuja.
Good morning. On the show today, we get to talk about gender-based violence, like I said, and it's a form of violence directed at a person because of their gender, and it's deeply rooted in gender inequality. It continues to be one of the most notable human rights violations within all sectors. Joining us on the show this morning to help us discuss and bring clarity and perspective to it is a development worker and a gender and women's rights practitioner working with Action Aid Nigeria as project coordinator, Not Women's Voice and Leadership Nigeria project. She is passionate about empowering women and women-based CSOs to discover themselves and become positive change agents that can impact their spheres and society at large. Niri Goyet is our guest in the studio this morning.
Good morning, listeners.
Thank you so much for coming, Nii. Also in the studio is an advocate for gender equality and human rights in Nigeria. She obtained her LLB and her LLM in Human Rights, Conflict and Justice from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. She is a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. She has also served as Communications Officer for International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA, here in Nigeria, and also served as the project lead for Play Women Initiative under the Play Network Africa. She is particularly passionate about the use of media as an avenue to transform lives. She gives victims of human rights abuse a voice to challenge perpetrators and to effect change. I would add that she runs an advocacy vlog called Butterfly Transform Yourself, all right? And she conducts social media campaigns on topical human rights and development issues. Akubweze Okocha is my guest in the studio.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming through to the studio. Gender-based violence, Chinyerugo, it's one issue that affects both men and women.
That's correct.
Both men and women get to experience gender-based violence, but the majority of victims are women and girls.
Yeah.
And it's apt that we have this conversation today.
That's correct. It's something that we can't run away from or we can't shy away from because it happens. We all know somebody, we all know a woman who has been a victim of gender-based violence. It comes in different forms. It can be physical, it can be mental, it could be sexual. So it's not specific to any particular form of violence because we are going to be very broad about our conversation today. If we had to break it down to the different forms of violence, then we'd have perhaps a lot more. But today we're going to be very general about a conversation about women's health and abuse that we receive as women. Truth be told, a lot of the times we find ourselves as ladies or women on the receiving end of a lot of this abuse, and we need to start talking about it, and we need to start supporting or finding solutions to offer to the people who are victims and encouraging them to seek help as soon as they can.
All right, we'll get straight into the conversation now to help our listener. What is gender-based violence?
Okay. Yeah. Gender-based violence is any form of violence that is being perpetrated against a person as a result of their gender, and that sort of violence causes physical or emotional harm to that person is gender-based violence. And just like she mentioned, we have 5 major categories of gender-based violence. We have the physical violence that ranges from, you getting a slap, to battery, being beaten, to murder, anything that can cause physical harm to the woman is a type of violence against women. Then you also have the psychological and emotional violence, that the woman suffers, when she's being deprived or she's being abused verbally by whoever. She's been put down, she's been segregated, or, any form of violence that can cause psychological pain to her, which may not necessarily be physical, is a form of gender-based violence as well. Then you have the sexual violence, which is also popular. You have the, like rape, you have incest, you have different types of rape. You have the spousal rape, you have rape of a minor, you have, rape, in terms of war, any form of sexual abuse, when a woman is being forced into sex without consent, that's a form of gender-based violence. And you also have socio-economic.
With regards to sexual abuse, would you also classify indecent exposure as a form of sexual abuse?
What do you mean by indecent exposure?
So if the other gender, or if somebody exposes themselves to exposes their private parts to a lady or a woman, would that be also a form of sexual abuse?
Yeah, when when she doesn't ask for it, that's some form of sexual harassment. When she's been sent images, that she does not want to see, or so that's also encroaching into her space. Then you also have socio-economic violence, when the woman or the girl is being deprived access to health, access to education, access to work, access to things that the other gender will normally have. Then the last form of gender-based violence against women is the harmful traditional practices, like the early marriage that we have, the female genital mutilation. You also have things like the widow's rights practiced in some cultures, and other forms of harmful traditional practices that are being done on women.
All right, let's come to you now, Nakubweze. Let's talk about the causes of some of this violence against women.
Okay, so first of all, I like to always make it clear that the one major cause of violence is the perpetrator, because I feel that we do have a culture of victim blaming. So I think that first things first, it needs to register in everybody's mind that the biggest perpetrator of violence, or the biggest cause of violence, is the perpetrator, and the fact that they have abusive tendencies. Now, there are factors in society which allows people with abusive tendencies to continue going on abusing people, such as, the lack of implementation of the law. We have laws laws such as the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, which has actually criminalized all these forms of violence, which my co-host or co-respondent just went through. And then you also have the criminal code, you have our constitution, but then we have ineffective enforcement mechanisms which encourages perpetrators to continue going on abusing people. There's also a culture of silence. We tend to find that when victims have been abused, or actually let me call them survivors, when survivors have been abused, they are reluctant to go out and share their story and to report to the police or to the law enforcement agencies because they don't feel like anything will be done, going back to the lack of implementation of the law. And they also don't want to get that negative feedback from people like, oh, what did you do to cause this? Or it must have been you to have made this happen to yourself. So those are the two main factors that I feel contribute to ensuring impunity when it comes to the offenders and to encourage them to keep on abusing people, because they know that society will not hold them accountable and the law too will not hold them accountable.
So, are there female lawyers or organizations that advocate for the rights of women in this regard?
Yes, of course. The organization that I used to work for and that I now consult for, FIDA, Federation of Female Lawyers in Nigeria, they're a women's rights organization that all they do is provide free legal representation for indigent women and children, and they also advocate for gender-friendly reforms in the law. FIDA was instrumental in getting this VAP law passed that I just spoke about. So aside from FIDA, there are also other organizations such as Global Rights. Most organizations and most NGOs you would find actually have a, should I call it a guarantee? They have like a specific grant for these types of cases, because we found that there's a phenomenon. It's actually an epidemic now, gender-based violence and violence against women in Nigeria. So you will tend to find that a lot of NGOs have provision to provide for women like that. Yeah.
I wanted to also add, going back to the questions about the causes, sometimes we find that the risk factor that perpetrates the gender-based violence is that most perpetrators have a history of being abused. Sometimes this abuse is not dealt with, is not talked about, and they have to carry it on with themselves, and they end up abusing other people. And that's where your mental health care comes in. That's where your support comes in, because you might be breeding a cycle of perpetrators if we don't address this problem we have in Nigeria, because it is a problem. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So you're going into the impact. So like even women that are being abused, if you find out a woman who has gone through long-term domestic violence, and the impact is gross. Like she herself, if you're not careful, yes, on her health, first her self-esteem. Yeah. She struggles with lack of confidence, low self-esteem, especially when she is verbally and physically abused, where she is being told you are useless, you don't amount to anything, you are dumb, you are not good, you're not beautiful. Where she's been talked down on, she struggles a lot with low self-esteem, and that affects her health-wise as well. So you have a lot of women struggling with high blood pressure, heart problems, and these are stuff that so many women, generations have had to carry. A lot of our mothers have had to deal with these health problems, and it's been seen as it's seen as normal by the society, because it's just one of those things. In fact, if a girl is going through abuse and she runs home to her mom, the mom will say, this is what I've been going through, like it's normal, so it's not a big deal. Just go back to your husband. I endured that with your dad, so you should also endure to be able to keep the home. And you find the whole circle replicating itself. And the woman, if you're not careful, she becomes abusive to her kids as well. So you see, an unhappy woman in the office, it reflects in her work. She's easily hot-tempered. It's a vicious circle where the woman is being abused, and she herself, she's not able to manage it. So when we're talking about resolving gender-based violence against women, to be specific, is something that it has a ripple effect on the society. Everybody benefits from it. Even the men, get happier when you have a happy woman.
All right, so how can we as individuals now, with all of that you've talked about, the impact on the society, not just even the woman's health now, how can we as individuals prevent gender-based violence?
Yeah, so one of the major causes for us to talk about prevention, one of the major causes that we also need to look at is the inequalities between men and women.
Inequalities?
Yes, gender inequalities, whereby the society believes that men are, we have a patriarchal culture in Nigeria where the society believes that the male is better than the female, so you have men, they feel, that right to power to make decisions, all the decisions, power to have control, power to power to do a lot of things that, how to just do anything. Then the women, on the other hand, the society feels, she doesn't have power to access, power to, so when all those things are abused, for us to address this, and the abuse has caused gender-based violence and violence against women, it has impacted women. For us to address such things, we need to change our orientation. We need to begin to view gender relations from a different perspective. The society needs orientation, about women's rights. Women's rights are fundamental human rights, where women also have the normal fundamental human rights are the right to life, right to dignity, right to personal liberty, right to freedom of expression. So when the society is reorientated, we change, our educational systems, begin to teach children, girls and boys, about both genders, being equal before God, and and how to relate with themselves, from this equality perspective, it will go a long way in reducing violence against women.
I think I'd like to sum up my own advice with 3 R's. 1, recognize. 2, report, and 3, remedy. So 1, recognize. As she has said, society needs to reorient themselves and start taking cognizance of different forms of violence which are, accepted in international standards as violence against women. Even in our law, there's a type of violence called financial violence. That is where a man makes a woman wholly financially dependent on him. He stops her from working, regulates the kind of money that she can earn. It's actually in our violence against, financial violence. And even when we went through the forms of violence, she classed it under socio-economic. So it may not stand out to you, but because I knew it, okay, that counts as financial violence.
Now, would you regard the man who says, I want my wife to be a housewife, and then she's solely dependent on me for everything, clothing, food, bathing soap, and all of that, doing that to his wife, is that also financial violence?
If that is also what she wants for herself, then that is not violence. Where it becomes violent and abusive is where you're going against that woman's rights and her own desires, her own choices. I think choice is a big thing when it comes to this women's rights movement. We don't necessarily want to be fighting to pay for everything, but we want the choice to be able to say, can I work? Can I contribute to the home if I want to contribute to the home? But where you have stifled me and kept me in a box where I need to buy my sanitary towel, I'm coming to come and beg you, please, I have to write application to your office or God knows what to get 100 naira from you. That is when you can see that there is an abusive and violent part of it.
So that's an abuse.
Yes, it is an abuse.
One other issue some men would argue will be what lawyers or the term spousal rape. Some people have said there's nothing like that if you're married to a woman, at any time of the day, you have possession of that woman because you're married to her. But a lot of women, legal practitioners like yourself, and women rights advocates will say spousal rape, you can't even, without her consent.
Yes, of course. Because we're not even basing this on our own personal opinions. Check the law. The violence against persons. I think the issue with this law is that not all states have implemented it. So I don't think that Nigerians really get a full grasp of what this law has done. But in our old law, in the criminal code, it used to be the case that spousal rape was not classified as rape. That's why this argument started coming. Some people are on one side, some people are on the other side. But now, the current position, this law was passed in 2015. Spousal rape is rape.
And there are penalties?
Yes, there are penalties. Life imprisonment.
For the husband?
Well, obviously, we have not gotten to court. Nobody has actually tested it. But based on the law, yes, whether you're my husband, whether you're my king,
wow,
like, there's no consent. So it's rape.
No, I please, I want to change the English again, right? Marital rape, for instance. I've had a lot of men, for instance, argue that, no, there's nothing really like that. But it's good that we're having this conversation here in the studio.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about the first R being recognized.
Yes.
The
second R is report, because we always have a let's mind my own business modus of operation in this country. You can hear your neighbor's wife clearly shouting, somebody is beating her. Who else would it be but him? At least try and get involved. Try and be your neighbor's keeper. Try and look out for things. And when you notice that there is an abuse going on, even with children, because I think we're focusing on women a lot, but girls are usually, in fact, more of the victims of abuse. I'm still shunned by Ochanya. Ochanya was living in her auntie's house. That's a 9-year-old girl in Benue who was literally raped to death by her uncle and her cousin. So the auntie was in the house and was seeing all of this happening. Obviously, she had a hint, because this girl at a point, she's falling sick, she has VVF. So many things are going on that any reasonable neighbor would ask questions like, what's really happening? And then it should have been on the auntie to now report that, look at what is happening within my own house. Be your neighbor's keeper. Even if it's your office colleague you notice coming in with black eye, even if you're just reporting to HR in the office, that's enough. Just do something to break the culture of silence, because as we've said, that culture of silence is such a huge factor that is continuing to allow this abuse continue in this country. And then number 3 is remedy. Do what you can, especially if it comes to children. Take the victim or the survivor out of that situation of abuse. That is something that anybody can do. Or you can just say, please, just come with me. Provide a safe space for them. Just do what you can. Now that social media activism has come about, if they're comfortable with that, you can share their story on social media. There are things like GoFundMe where people can now start raising money for them, and you provide a remedy for the survivors. So just remember those 3 R's: recognize, report, and remedy.
Awesome.
All right, it's the Mind Clinic on Rhythm 94.7 Abuja. It's a program proudly brought to you by the Neem Foundation. Would like for you to be part of the conversation if you get down to Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag the Mind Clinic. It's at Rhythm 947 Abuja at the Neem Sanctuary. You can also send us messages on WhatsApp 08178000947. You can as well call us up and let's get your voices here on the program. We'd like to get your contributions and comment. If you call us 08178000. In 2018, approximates that 80 million women and girls are victims of gender-based violence, and nearly 3 in 10 Nigerian women have experienced physical violence since age 15. It goes on to say 44% of divorced, separated, or widowed women have experienced violence since age 15. 25% of married women or those living with their partners have experienced violence. 28% raped you, and you tell your mother, she tries to shut you up. And these ladies learn to shut up almost all their lives. What can we do to encourage more ladies or more girls speaking up? That's one. And how can we have women, seek help when abused?
Okay, I think the first thing we can do to encourage more girls to speak up is to take action when women and girls actually speak up, because if they start seeing more cases of people being held accountable and people sharing their stories and it bringing some form of remedy for them, then more women will start and more girls will start feeling more comfortable sharing their stories. I think we also need to encourage more women and girls to take advantage of the resources that they have, especially when it comes to social media. I remember the Arewa Me Too movement, which all just started from a hashtag. People just started sending in their stories via Twitter. So you don't always have to feel like you need to go to an organization or go to a police establishment. You can just tweet an anonymous message or, send a DM to an organization such as Neem or such as FIDA or such as Action Aid, in fact, because there are organizations out there that will be willing to help you. And I think that people also let me not say people, teachers and caretakers also need to be more cognizant of issues or things that are happening with these women and girls, because if girls are going through any form of abuse, they should be the first to notice it, and then they should encourage them to have the comfort in speaking to them about whatever it is that's going on.
Yeah, and another thing that needs to be done, we also always need to keep emphasizing the need for the girl to speak out or the woman to speak out. Let's break that culture of silence. Keep talking until someone does something. Speak to whoever, speak to your neighbors, speak to places where you feel safe to talk about it until something is done. Nothing can replace that thing about the girl talking, speaking out. Yeah, and we as people in the society, we also need to change our minds and perspective about a girl talking about abuse, not to stigmatize her, to reduce the culture of blame the victim, get rid of such culture, and begin to talk about, make the perpetrator, let's talk more about the person that perpetrated the violence. Let his name go around on social media so that someone who sees a perpetrator being shamed, a potential perpetrator will see what is done to another person and, take corrections from there. And also, we need to keep training people. You can't do enough work on gender-based violence. We need to keep training all the actors that handle cases of violence against women on how to be more professional, so that these women can and girls can feel confident to come and report cases. Because why cases are not reported, like she said, is when they are being mishandled or when she suffers another form of abuse by reporting the case, where she's being stigmatized and talked about. Yeah.
And I think just to add on to that as well, the way that our justice system responds to cases of abuse is something that I feel needs serious reform. Because, for example, there's a 9-year-old case I'm working on. She was raped by her neighbor, and it's been over 7 months, and the case is still in court. Typically, those types of cases, especially with her tender age, maximum of 3 months. I believe if there was like a special case or a special court that handled these sorts of cases, then the process of getting through them would be so much quicker, and then victims wouldn't feel like they're reliving the traumatic incident anytime they have to go to court and say the story again and go through this thing for years upon end. God knows when her case is going to end, because when they adjourn on one date, it's like 3 months before we get the next date again. So I believe that we also need to speed up how we respond to these types of cases.
And also get more gender laws, like the gender equal opportunity law case, states where they have that, set up family courts where these cases can be handled immediately and not having to go through the normal courts. Yeah.
But before we go, I would also like to let women and girls know that you can report cases of domestic violence as well.
Yes.
Domestic violence, if you feel like, this man is always abusing you physically, even emotionally, he's beating you all the time, he's saying abusive words to you, you can report this man to organizations, right?
Yes.
There are organizations to reach out to. You can reach out to the Neem Foundation. How can we reach you at the Neem Foundation?
Okay, so for if you want to get hold of us at Neem Foundation, first of all, you can go on our Instagram account. It's Neem Sanctuary. For our contact number, you can call us. Our contact number is 0706 062 5054. So I'll say that again, 0706 062 5054. I think just to add to what the ladies have said, it's very important that this conversation that we're having I think one thing for me that I also found quite interesting, that a lot of the times the conversation around GBV is around married women, people in very committed relationships, but you can also see gender-based violence in a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. It does happen. So it's very important to say, oh no, because we're not married, then it's not domestic violence. It's just, he's just correcting me. That's not true. And another thing that we as ladies need to be very cognizant of is the fact that sometimes we tend to label ourselves and we wear that label. So we think we are the one that has caused the, we've caused the abuse to happen to us because we did this or we did that, or we didn't look a certain way, or we didn't do a certain thing. And it's very important that we understand that you did not cause the abuse. It was done to you. And that we begin to also look at the way we see ourselves because of how things are, because of what has been done to us. And it comes down to changing the conversation and the words we use when we talk about people who have experienced abuse or gender-based violence, because it also goes a long way in helping them seek help, because nobody wants to go around thinking, oh, I'm second class now, or I'm second hand, or I've been abused. Nobody wants to go around feeling like they're less of who they are. So as individuals, when we want to help people who are also victims of gender-based violence, we should look at the words we use. We're not blaming them. It's not their fault that this thing has happened to them. It's the perpetrator who did that to them.
All right. The multiple words of Chinyerugo Densi, clinical psychologist at the Neem Foundation. Thank you so much for being part of the show. We must also thank you so much, Akubweze Okocha, an advocate for gender equality and human rights here in Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And we must say a very big thank you to Niri Goyit, development worker, gender and women's rights practitioner with Action Aid Nigeria. We say thank you so much for coming at short notice.
You're welcome.
And I make you a promise this day that I'll bring you back into the studio to talk about issues to promote and advocate for the rights of women in Nigeria. We must, I say it again without fear of favor, we must support women. If women are supporting women now, the men must also support women.
100%.
Thank you so much for coming through to the studio.
Thank you.
Well, the show comes back again next week, Wednesday at 8 a.m. right here on this station. And I assure you that next week we'll be looking at substance abuse. It's important to have this conversation. Substance abuse, not just men, not just boys, even women are running towards that area now in regards to getting succor, sometimes from pain.
Like abuse?
Abuse as well.
Yes.
But we would have an extensive conversation on that next week, Wednesday, right here on this station. We must say thank you so much for being a part of the show. Again, sincere apologies for our inability to take calls on the program today. And the Mind Clinic comes to you from the Neem Foundation. My name is Victor Pepple. Have a good morning.
More music and less talk on Rhythm 94.7.
Teasing me, telling me no. But this time I need